So what are the four problems that we need to talk about? We're going to dive into them and discuss them one by one, but let me just give you the overview first. The first issue that we have is content. What are our kids seeing? What are they saying? What are they sharing? Second issue is the context. Where are they when they're doing it? When are they doing it? Should they be in bed? Is it happening at 1 o'clock? Is it happening at their friend's house? Is it happening at school or on camp? Where and when and what are the first two big challenges that we're dealing with. The third big challenge that we need to address is conflict. I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but every time you try to have a conversation with your kids about their screen use, whether it's content or context, it results in conflict. There's such a challenge, and they don't want to admit that there's a problem because they're scared we'll take their devices off them, that will try to limit them, that will stop them getting all the good stuff that their phones provide them, that their screens provide them. And the fourth issue is the dishonesty that comes as a result of the conflict and as a result of the content and as a result of the context. So these are the four main themes that we're going to address as we go through our conversation for the next 45 to 50 minutes. Wasim, I really appreciate your comment. Wasim has said it's so concerning. Pornography and gambling, so easily accessible on their phones, it can happen at any time. So what are we supposed to do about it? I think we need to first of all have a conversation about the research. Let's just talk briefly. I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but the research in essence currently says mostly for parents, you don't need to worry. It's not a big deal. Mostly, don't worry. It's not a big deal. Let me tell you why that is though, and then we'll talk more specifically about some more pointed research. From a psychological point of view, when we do research, we look at averages. So on average, when people eat too much chocolate or when people live too much of a sedentary life, they're going to have a decrease in their health. That health-related behavior is going to reduce their well-being, reduce their physical health, may result in weight gain, and so on. Okay, so on average that happens, but the reality is for some people, they can eat a whole lot of terrible food and they don't actually gain weight. There may be some invisible health issues, but we don't actually see the weight gain. Or some people don't exercise and yet they still don't gain weight. So on average, we see these things, but there are some people for whom it doesn't happen. And there are some people who eat really well and exercise a lot and they still just gain weight and they look like they're not healthy. So there's more to this story than just the averages. Nevertheless, we need to talk about this average issue for a second, and to do it, I want to talk about World War II. In World War II, the American Air Force lost more of its planes and more of its pilots to A, friendly fire, and B, malfunction or pilot error than it actually lost to enemy fire, to combat. Now that is a staggering statistic. It's just dreadful and so painful to know that you're sending your best flight pilots out there and there's a greater chance that they're going to lose their lives because of pilot error or a problem with the plane or friendly fire than the enemy shooting at them. How devastating. How did you reduce that? Well, as the US Air Force was combing through the numbers, they brought in a statistician and said, we need you to help with this. It wasn't until after the war that they actually figured this out. But the statistician had a look at the way the the way the cockpits were designed. They looked at why the cockpit had the steering and flight column as far away from the pilot and the side of the height of the seat and where the windshield was. Had a look at all the cockpit variables and was curious to know why the measurements were what they were. So the Air Force said, well, here's our statistics. We've run the statistics. This is the average pilot. The average pilot has an arm length of this and a leg length of this and a torso length of this and a head circumference of this. This is why our helmet's this size and but hand width or hand strength or hand whatever of this. So we've got all of these stats to help us to design the perfect cockpit based on the average pilot. Well, the statistician said, this is fascinating. Let me just choose a random selection of 4,000 pilots and let's have a look at how they're going. And essentially, what the statistician found was this. If we look at height, weight, reach, torso, shoulders, chest, waist, hips, and legs, and we just select 2 pilots at random, what we're seeing is, on average, this is what their height is, and on average, this is what their weight is, and so on. But you'll note that no pilot is average. In fact, let me ask you a question. Of the 4,000 pilots that they used in their statistical sample, 4,000 pilots, how many of them would you imagine were actually average on every one of those measurements? The answer was none. Dr. Helen, I'm not surprised that Dr. Helen got it. The answer was none. So I got that story from a book by a guy called Todd Rose. He's a Harvard professor at the Graduate School of Education. He actually runs a think tank now. He's left Harvard. But the book is called The End of Average, and he highlights that when we look at statistics, we're always talking about averages. But Anna, your child is not average, and Helen, your child is not average. None of our kids are average. And this is one of the great challenges that I have as somebody who is providing advice to parents. I'm trying to give the best advice that I can based on what happens on average, recognizing that nobody's average. Everybody's just a little bit not quite average. We all fall within a reasonable range of close to average. And so the statistics are still generally helpful-ish. But if you're designing a cockpit based on the average body size and shape, and none of them actually fit that average body size and shape, is it any wonder that pilot error and aeroplane malfunction are causing death? In fact, as a result of the statistics that this particular man was involved in with the US Air Force, they came up with a remarkable and a fascinating answer. The answer was, we need adjustable seats. We need to be able to give pilots the opportunity to move their seat up or down or forward or back, and to be able to reach the pedals or reach the controls by giving them more control. So what does this mean for you and your son? It means that I'm not going to give you a straight up answer in this webinar. Why? Because your son's not average. Your son's environment's not average. Your son's school's not average. Your son's peer group isn't average. Your son's computer usage is probably not that average either. Your family is not that average. Therefore, if I give you average answers, you're going to get average results, and that's not going to work.